My wife gave birth and went insane. She threatened me, abandoned me and our daughter, then reappeared. Years later, with a new rich husband wanting full custody. She thought she won, but she failed to realize I had an ace up my sleeve. My biggest dream in life was always to be the world's greatest dad. Ever since I was a teenager, I imagined myself sipping hot coffee out of a cheesy Father's Day mug, dropping my kids to sports practice, and posing for family portraits, making silly faces I was too old to make. It was a simple dream, but a perfect one. That dream came true 5 years ago. The day my wife and I brought Isabella home was the best of my life. I spent that night by Isabella's side, singing off-key lullabies and changing her diapers. I talked to her about how one day she'd come running home from school, her little arms high in the air, handing me drawings she'd made of Super Dad. I couldn't wait for that day. But unfortunately, life isn't like the movies. My wife developed postpartum, something doctors forewarned because of her pre-existing mental disorders. They said she might experience mood swings, but not much more. Well, it was much more than mood swings. Within 4 weeks of Isabella being home, my wife began lashing out. Seemingly overnight, she became angry, erratic, borderline schizophrenic and violent. She'd throw things, scream at Isabella for crying, curse me out. I remember sitting down with her one day. "Please, let's see a doctor," I begged, but her eyes were stone cold, piercing daggers into my soul. Before I knew it, she was shouting again, her roars making Isabella cry. I had to lock myself in Isabella's room and hold her for hours. Over time, my wife's temper turned Isabella fearful. She began barely responding to me. The silly faces I made that she used to laugh at now resulted in empty stares. Her cries were no more than quiet, scared whimpers. She was no longer the happy kid growing up in a warm, loving home. Instead, she was a scared, terrified girl who had even stopped crying just to not give her mother a reason to yell. I remember feeling like a failure every time I held her. It's actually on her first birthday, I decided I was done. She spoke her first words that day. "Stop." I was confused at first, but then it hit me. Throughout the first year of her life, she had heard me begging her mother to stop more times than she heard the words mama or dada. That's why she was saying stop. My heart shattered, and I initiated the divorce process not long after. The divorce was tough, extremely tough. My wife was nastier than ever. She manipulated me into getting my house. "Family courts favor the mother," she threatened. I called her bluff at first, but then she sent me pictures of self-inflicted bruises on her body. Fearing she would say I hurt Isabella next, I conceded, and after the divorce was done, I used whatever I had left to rent the cheapest one-bedroom apartment I could. The day me and Isabella moved in was the hardest of my life. It was like the world was ending, like everything was imploding. But then I looked at Isabella, and she was giggling while playing with hand. "Dada," she said, biting my thumb. I almost cried. This was the first time she called me Dada, and that single word, that cute little Dada, gave me all the motivation I needed. Slowly but surely, I started working my way back up in life. Sure, it was hard. I barely slept, eating air for breakfast, just to buy Isabella new clothes and toys as she grew. My eye bags were heavy. Truthfully, I felt like a zombie. But then I'd see Isabella's precious smile, and it would fuel me to wake up in 4 hours and go again. Over time, Isabella changed too. She went from being afraid to cry, to bawling her eyes out when she needed a diaper change. Most would have found it annoying, but I found it beautiful. She was overcoming her trauma. Soon, she started hugging me and demanding cuddles. As she got older, she began refusing to sleep until I told her a story. And then came the day that changed everything. I came home from work on a random Wednesday to find her drawing. She told me to close my eyes and wait, so I did. And when she told me to open them, I burst into tears. It was me and her as stick figures, holding hands, with "Best Dad Ever, I Love You" written on top, and a little note for me on the other side of the page. I looked up at her, and her brown eyes sparkled, gleaming against the light. I scooped her into my arms and nuzzled her into my chest, trying to hold back tears, but I couldn't do it. I cried on her shoulder, my tears streaming like a river. She wiped my tears with her sleeve and told me if I was crying, she needed to cry too. She then burst into a dramatic fake cry that made me laugh. It was the best day of my life. Sadly, what followed was the worst day of my life, because not even a week later, her mother contacted me. She wanted Isabella and was taking me to court in an attempt to gain full custody. Not visitation, not shared custody, full custody. The paper trembled in my hands as I read it. According to her petition, she'd made significant life changes and could now provide a stable and nurturing environment for Isabella. She claimed I had alienated the child from her mother and prevented a healthy maternal relationship. It was all lies. She was the one who disappeared for over 3 years, but now she wanted to swoop in and take Isabella away from the only stable home she'd ever known. I collapsed onto the couch, trying to figure out how to fight this. I couldn't afford a good lawyer. We were stable, but not well off. I called the only attorney I knew, a guy who'd helped me with the initial custody arrangement. He reviewed the paperwork, and his face got grim. Apparently, Jessica had married some wealthy guy, moved into a big house in a fancy neighborhood, and was claiming she could provide Isabella with advantages and opportunities I couldn't match. As if love and stability could be measured in square footage and private school tuition. I learned that her new husband, Michael, was pushing her to establish a proper family image in their social circle. Having a child would complete their picture-perfect life, and Jessica, always concerned with appearances, was eager to play the devoted mother role now that that the difficult early years were behind her. Yesterday, Isabella came home from preschool excited about the upcoming father-daughter dance. She asked if we could go shopping for a special dress this weekend. I smiled and said yes, but inside I was terrified. Would we still be together for that dance? Or would Jessica succeed in ripping apart the life we'd built? Today, I have to respond to the court summons. I have no idea how this will play out, but I know one thing. I'm not giving up my daughter without the fight of my life. I spent the whole day researching custody laws online. My eyes were burning from staring at my laptop screen for hours, but I couldn't stop. The court date was set for 3 weeks from now, and I had to prepare myself. I called my old attorney again to see if he could cut me some kind of deal on his fees, but even his friends and family rate was way more than I could afford. Look, I can give you some advice, he told me. Document everything. Every time Isabella mentions something good about living with you, write it down. Take photos of her doing homework, playing, looking happy. Courts care about stability and the child's best interest. I took his advice seriously. That night, I started a journal specifically about Isabella's daily life. I wrote about our bedtime routine, how she always wanted the same book about a rabbit family, and how she'd started learning to write her name. I took photos of our apartment, clean, organized, with Isabella's artwork displayed proudly on the walls. The next day, I took Isabella to her preschool and asked to speak with her teacher, Ms. Morgan. She'd always been fond of Isabella, commenting on how well-adjusted and friendly she was. Of course, I remember when Isabella first started here, Ms. Morgan said when I explained the situation. She was so shy, would barely speak. Now she's one of our most social children. The transformation has been remarkable. I almost cried right there in the tiny preschool chair. Would you be willing to write a letter about her progress? For the court, Ms. Morgan agreed without hesitation. One small victory at least. On the way home, Isabella chatted happily about the class pet, a hamster named Cheese. For a moment, watching her in the rearview mirror gesturing excitedly, everything felt normal. Then I remembered the court summons sitting on my kitchen counter, and my stomach twisted. I called my parents that evening after Isabella was asleep. They lived 3 states away and couldn't help much practically, but I needed their support. My mom immediately offered to send money for a lawyer. We've been saving for a new roof, but this is more important, she insisted. I swallowed my pride and accepted. Family helps family. That's what I'd always taught Isabella. The next day, I used the money as a retainer for a lawyer who specialized in family law. Her name was Sarah, and her office was small but neat. She listened carefully to my story, taking notes and nodding. Jessica's absence for 3 years works in your favor, Sarah explained. But judges can be swayed by dramatic turnarounds and second chances. We need to show that Isabella's best interest is to stay with you, the parent who's been constant in her life. I left feeling slightly more hopeful. Back at work, I explained the situation to my boss and asked for flexible hours during the court proceedings. He was understanding. He had kids of his own and knew what was at stake. That weekend, I took Isabella shopping for her dance dress as promised. We found a purple one with sparkles that made her twirl around the store gleefully. The saleswoman commented on what a cute daughter I had, and I felt a surge of both pride and fear. I couldn't lose her. While we were out, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Jessica, asking to see Isabella before the court date. My first instinct was to refuse. She hadn't bothered to see her daughter in 3 years. Why start now? But Sarah had warned me that appearing uncooperative could hurt my case. I texted back suggesting a public meeting at the park near our apartment. She agreed, and we set a date for the following Saturday. I didn't tell Isabella who we were meeting. I didn't want to get her hopes up or confuse her. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. What if Isabella didn't recognize her mother? What if she did, and was upset? What if Jessica tried to manipulate her? The questions kept circling in my mind until my alarm finally went off. We arrived at the park early. Isabella was excited about the playground, completely unaware of what was about to happen. I spotted Jessica before she saw us. She looked different. Designer clothes, perfect hair, expensive-looking sunglasses. Michael stood beside her, presumably the new husband. When she approached, Isabella hid behind my legs, suddenly shy with these strangers. Jessica knelt down to Isabella's level. "Hi, Isabella. Do you remember me? I'm your mommy." Isabella looked confused, glancing up at me for confirmation. I nodded gently, and she turned back to Jessica. "You're in the pictures," Isabella said finally. Jessica's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly, pulling out a gift-wrapped package. "I brought you something special." Inside was an elaborate doll that probably cost more than our weekly grocery budget. Isabella thanked her politely, the way I'd taught her to accept gifts, but she didn't seem particularly impressed. After some awkward small talk, Jessica suggested ice cream. I agreed, and we walked to a nearby shop. Michael barely spoke to me, but was overly enthusiastic with Isabella, telling her about the swimming pool at their house and the room they'd prepared for her. Isabella listened wide-eyed, but kept returning to my side. I could see Jessica getting frustrated by this. "She's just shy," Jessica told Michael loudly enough for me to hear. "Once she's living with us, she'll open up more." I bit my tongue. Making a scene wouldn't help anyone, especially Isabella. The meeting ended after about an hour, with Jessica promising Isabella they'd see each other again soon. As we walked home, Isabella was quiet, clutching her new doll. "Did you have fun?" I asked carefully. "That lady is really my mom?" she asked, looking confused. I nodded. "Yes, but she's been away for a while. Do I have to go live with her now?" My heart broke at the worry in her voice. "No, sweetie, you're staying with me. The judge just needs to talk to all of us to make sure everything's okay." She seemed satisfied with that answer, but that night she climbed into my bed around midnight, something she hadn't done in months. The next week was a flurry of preparation. Sarah helped me gather documents, Isabella's school records, medical history, even receipts showing I'd consistently provided for her needs. Ms. Morgan delivered her letter, a glowing testimony about Isabella's progress and how well-adjusted she was. Meanwhile, Jessica ramped up her campaign. She sent Isabella expensive gifts almost daily, toys, clothes, even a tablet that I thought was completely inappropriate for a 5-year-old. I documented each gift, but let Isabella keep them. I didn't want her to feel caught in the middle. 2 days before the court date, I received a disturbing call from Isabella's preschool. Jessica had shown up there, demanding to see Isabella and claiming she had legal rights as her mother. Thankfully, the school had called me instead of letting her in, but it rattled me. I immediately called Sarah, who filed an emergency motion restricting Jessica from contact with Isabella outside of agreed-upon meetings. The night before court, Isabella sensed my anxiety despite my efforts to hide it. As I tucked her into bed, she reached up and patted my cheek. "Don't worry, Daddy. I want to stay with you," she said, with the simple certainty of a child. I held it together until I closed her bedroom door, then sat on the kitchen floor and cried silently. The thought of losing her was unbearable. Court day arrived with gray skies and drizzling rain. My neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, had agreed to watch Isabella for the day. She was a retired kindergarten teacher who adored Isabella, and I trusted her completely. Isabella gave me an extra tight hug before I left, as if she somehow understood the importance of the day. The courtroom was intimidating, all polished wood and formal atmosphere. Jessica was already there with Michael and their lawyer, who looked expensive in his tailored suit. Sarah squeezed my arm reassuringly as we took our seats. The judge, an older woman named Judge Taylor, reviewed the case files before addressing us. Jessica's lawyer went first, painting a picture of a mother who had made mistakes, but had transformed her life, and now could provide Isabella with every advantage. He emphasized the beautiful home, the excellent school district, the financial stability. He also implied that I had deliberately kept Isabella from having a relationship with her mother. When it was Sarah's turn, she methodically presented the evidence of my consistent care for Isabella. She submitted Ms. Morgan's letter, photos of our life together, and medical records showing I'd never missed a checkup or vaccination. Most importantly, she highlighted Jessica's 3-year absence. "Your Honor, Ms. Parker voluntarily disappeared from Isabella's life during crucial developmental years," Sarah argued. "Now that Mr. Thompson has created a stable, loving environment, she wants to disrupt it based solely on material advantages." The judge asked several pointed questions to both sides. She seemed particularly interested in why Jessica hadn't utilized her visitation rights for so long. Jessica claimed she had been working on herself and didn't want to expose Isabella to her journey. I noticed she never actually apologized for abandoning our daughter. After several hours, Judge Taylor called a recess. She ordered both parties to meet with a court-appointed evaluator who would assess both households and Isabella's well-being. The final hearing would be scheduled after the evaluation was complete. Outside the courtroom, Jessica approached me, Michael hovering protectively behind her. "This would be easier if you'd just be reasonable," she told me quietly. "Isabella deserves the best life possible. You know you can't give her what we can." "She deserves stability and love," I countered. "Those can't be bought." She laughed lightly. "So noble, but let's be realistic. Your apartment, your job, do you really think that's the best you can do for her? We have a college fund set up already." I walked away before I said something I'd regret. Sarah caught up with me in the parking lot. "You did well in there," she assured me. The judge seemed concerned about Jessica's absence. "Now we just need to make sure the evaluation goes smoothly." The evaluator, Dr. Williams, scheduled home visits for the following week. I spent days cleaning our apartment, making sure Isabella's room looked its best, stocking the fridge with healthy foods. It felt ridiculous to be so nervous. This was our normal life after all, but I knew how much was riding on his impression. The day of our evaluation, Isabella was fortunately in a good mood. She proudly showed Dr. Williams her books, her small collection of stuffed animals, and the corner where we did art projects together. I answered his questions honestly about our routines, discipline approaches, and how we handled Isabella's questions about her mother. "And the bedroom situation?" he asked, noting our 2-bedroom apartment. "Isabella has her own room," I explained. "It's small, but it's her space. She helps decorate it, picks the bedding, everything." Dr. Williams nodded, making notes. He spent about 2 hours with us, observing our interactions and talking to Isabella alone for a short time. Before leaving, he thanked us both and gave Isabella a sticker, which she immediately placed on her favorite stuffed rabbit. A few days later, I learned that Dr. Williams had visited Jessica's home. Through Isabella's preschool grapevine, amazing what parents will share in the pickup line, I heard that Jessica had created a princess room, complete with canopy bed and custom murals. I tried not to let it bother me. Surely the evaluator would look beyond material things, but doubt crept in anyway. The week after the evaluations, I received a disturbing call from Mrs. Johnson. Jessica had shown up at our apartment building, asking neighbors questions about me, what time I came home, whether I ever had visitors, if they ever heard Isabella crying. It felt like she was building a case against me by fishing for negative information. Sarah advised me to document this, but not confront Jessica. "It looks desperate on her part," she assured me. "Let her keep digging. She's only making herself look bad." The final straw came when Isabella came home from preschool confused and upset. Apparently, Jessica had shown up again and told Isabella that soon she'd be living in a big, beautiful house with a real mommy. Ms. Morgan had intervened, but the damage was done. That night, Isabella had a nightmare and climbed into my bed, clutching her rabbit. "I don't want to go away, Daddy," she whispered. I held her close. "I'm doing everything I can to make sure you stay right here with me." Sarah filed another motion the next day, asking the court to prohibit Jessica from contacting Isabella at school. The judge granted it immediately, which gave me some hope that she was seeing through Jessica's tactics. 2 weeks later, Dr. Williams submitted his report, and we were called back to court. I sat nervously while Judge Taylor reviewed the evaluation. Jessica looked confident, whispering occasionally to Michael and her lawyer. Judge Taylor cleared her throat and addressed the court. I've reviewed Dr. Williams' thorough evaluation of both households. While Mrs. Parker Donnelly's home offers certain material advantages, Dr. Williams found Mr. Thompson's home to be warm, stable, and entirely appropriate for Isabella's needs. My heart leapt, but I kept my expression neutral. The judge continued. More concerning is Dr. Williams' observation of Isabella's anxiety regarding potential changes to her living situation. His report indicates she is thriving in her current environment and expressed clear preference for remaining with her father. Jessica's face hardened. Her lawyer quickly stood to object, arguing that a 5-year-old's preference shouldn't be given significant weight. Judge Taylor acknowledged this, but noted that the child's emotional state was still relevant. Additionally, the judge continued, I find troubling the pattern of Mrs. Parker Donnelly's attempts to influence Isabella outside proper channels, despite having made no effort to be part of her life for 3 years prior. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Judge Taylor adjusted her glasses and delivered her ruling. I would maintain primary physical custody of Isabella. Jessica would receive gradually increasing visitation rights, starting with supervised visits, contingent on her completion of parenting classes. Jessica stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. This is ridiculous. I'm her mother, Mrs. Parker Donnelly. Control yourself or I'll hold you in contempt, Judge Taylor warned. Motherhood is not just a biological fact, but a relationship built over time. You have much rebuilding to do. Outside the courtroom, I called Mrs. Johnson with the news. I could hear Isabella in the background asking questions. Tell her I'm bringing home pizza to celebrate, I said, my voice breaking with relief. As I hung up, I saw Jessica and Michael exiting the building. She stopped when she saw me, her expression unreadable. This isn't over, she said quietly. I'll be seeing a lot more of Isabella now, and eventually, she'll see which life is better. I took a deep breath. I hope you do become a consistent part of her life. She deserves that, but don't ever think you can buy her love. She turned away without responding. I watched them walk to their expensive car, feeling not triumph, but exhaustion and lingering concern. This victory was important, but I knew it wasn't the end of our story. Jessica would be part of Isabella's life now, a complication I'd have to manage carefully. That evening, Isabella and I ate pizza on our living room floor, watching her favorite movie. When I tucked her in later, she seemed more relaxed than she had in weeks. Daddy, she whispered as I kissed her goodnight. I'm glad I get to stay in our home. Me too, sweetheart, I said, smiling. Me too. The next morning, reality set in. Isabella's first supervised visit with Jessica was scheduled for the following weekend. I had to prepare her emotionally while putting aside my own complicated feelings, and I still had to figure out how to afford the ongoing legal fees if Jessica decided to fight the custody arrangement again. But for now, watching Isabella hum to herself as she ate her cereal, I allowed myself to feel grateful. We had won this battle. Whatever came next, we would face it together. I started preparing Isabella the best I could for her first supervised visit with Jessica. I didn't want to make it a big deal, but I also knew she needed some warning. The night before, she got really quiet during dinner. What if she wants me to call her mommy? Isabella asked, pushing her mac and cheese around her plate. I don't even know her. You can call her whatever feels comfortable, I told her. Maybe just her name at first. Nobody can force you to say anything you don't want to. The first visit was at this community center place they use for supervised visits. The supervisor was this older lady named Susan, who had a kind face and seemed to genuinely care about making things comfortable for Isabella. Jessica showed up 15 minutes late with another fancy gift. Isabella hid behind my legs until Susan gently coaxed her into the playroom. I had to wait in this sad little waiting room with old magazines and uncomfortable chairs. Those 2 hours felt like 20. When Isabella finally came out, she looked emotionally drained, but okay. Susan gave me a thumbs up, which I took as a good sign. She bought me ice cream, Isabella told me on the way home, and said next time we could go to the zoo if Susan says it's okay. I just nodded and asked if she had fun. She shrugged in that non-committal way kids do when they're processing stuff. That night, she climbed into my bed again and fell asleep, holding my hand. The visits continued every Saturday. After about a month, Isabella stopped being so anxious beforehand. She even started looking forward to them a little because Jessica always planned some elaborate activity or brought amazing snacks. I couldn't compete with that, but I didn't try to. I just maintained our normal, stable routine. One day after a visit, Isabella came home with her nails painted bright pink with little glitter stars. She was beaming. Jessica did my nails. She said I could call her that instead of mommy if I wanted, and she didn't get mad or anything. That actually surprised me. Maybe Jessica was finally putting Isabella's needs first. I helped Isabella touch up her nail polish that week when it started chipping, and she talked about Jessica like maybe they could actually have some kind of relationship. Then came the bombshell. About 3 months into the visitation schedule, I got served with papers again. Jessica Jessica was requesting a modification to the custody arrangement. She wanted unsupervised visits and overnight stays every other weekend. Her reasoning? Isabella was clearly comfortable with her now, and the supervisor's reports had all been positive. I called Sarah immediately. She wasn't as concerned as I was. This was expected, she explained. The judge set up the supervised visits as a stepping stone. If they've gone well, the court might grant unsupervised time next. But something felt off about the timing. Isabella had just started talking about the huge playroom at Jessica's house and all the cool toys there. It felt like Jessica was deliberately creating this fantasy world to lure Isabella in. The hearing was scheduled for the following month. In the meantime, I started noticing subtle changes in Isabella. She began comparing our apartment unfavorably to Jessica's house. She asked why we couldn't have a swimming pool or a trampoline in our backyard, which we didn't even have. One day she came home and announced that Michael had promised to teach her to ride a horse once she started staying overnight. I tried not to show my frustration. That sounds fun, but remember, horses are a big responsibility. It's not just about riding them. She rolled her eyes, something she'd never done before. I know that. Michael has horses at his lake house. They have special people who take care of them. Great. How was I supposed to compete with horses and lake houses? I brought it up to Sarah, who advised me to document these conversations, but not make a big deal about them to Isabella. Kids are impressionable, she said. Jessica is clearly trying to buy Isabella's affection, but eventually, Isabella will see through that. The day before the hearing, Isabella came home from her visit, unusually quiet. I tried asking about her day, but she just shrugged and went to her room. Later, I found her sitting on her bed, looking at a photo album I'd made of our life together. Everything okay, sweetie? I asked, sitting beside her. She nodded, then hesitated. Jessica said I'll have my own bathroom when I stay overnight, with special towels that have my name on them. That sounds nice, I said carefully. She also said, Isabella trailed off, looking uncomfortable. She said that you probably don't want me to go because you're jealous that they have more money than you. I took a deep breath to control my anger. Using a 5-year-old as a messenger was low, even for Jessica. Money isn't what makes a home, Bella. It's love and feeling safe and having people who are always there for you no matter what. She nodded and leaned against me. I know. I like our home. The hearing the next day was tense. Jessica arrived looking perfectly put together, while I felt rumpled despite wearing my best shirt. Her lawyer presented the supervisor's positive reports and argued that continuing the restrictions was unnecessary. Sarah countered by raising concerns about Jessica using material things to influence Isabella and making inappropriate comments about me. The judge listened carefully to both sides. To my surprise, Susan, the supervisor, asked to speak. She explained that while the visits had gone well on the surface, she had concerns about the way Jessica seemed to be trying to buy Isabella's affection rather than building a genuine relationship. The focus is always on the next exciting activity or gift, not on getting to know her daughter's actual interests or needs, Susan explained. The judge considered this, then made her ruling. Jessica could have unsupervised visits during the day, but overnight visits would be delayed for another 3 months. During that time, she was ordered not to make promises about future living arrangements or purchases to Isabella. Jessica was clearly unhappy with this compromise, but managed to keep her composure in court. Outside, she walked past me without a word, her heels clicking aggressively on the tile floor. For the next 2 months, things actually went pretty smoothly. The unsupervised visits meant I didn't get Susan's insights anymore, but Isabella seemed okay when she returned home. She talked less about fancy toys and more about actually doing things with Jessica, baking cookies, going to the movies, normal parent-child stuff. I started to think maybe Jessica had gotten the message. Maybe she was finally putting in the work to be a real parent instead of just playing the role. Then Isabella came home one Sunday with news that made my blood run cold. Guess what? Jessica and Michael are moving to Florida. They're going to buy a house by Disney World, and I can go there for all school vacations. My heart sank. Florida was a 20-hour drive away. This would mean Isabella flying alone multiple times a year, spending holidays away from me, and Jessica potentially filing for custody modifications in a state where I had no support system. I immediately called Sarah, who filed an emergency motion to prevent relocation of visitation out of state. The judge granted a temporary freeze while the matter was considered, which sent Jessica into a rage. She called me that night, screaming that I was trying to ruin her life and that Isabella deserved the opportunities she could provide. The next day, she didn't show up for her scheduled visit with Isabella, or the next one, or the one after that. Isabella was confused and hurt, asking if Jessica was mad at her. I tried to explain that grown-ups sometimes have complicated feelings that have nothing to do with kids, but it was hard to justify Jessica's disappearing act. 2 weeks later, I got an email from Jessica's lawyer. They were withdrawing the petition for custody modification. Apparently, Jessica and Michael had decided to move forward with their relocation plans without waiting for the court's decision on visitation. They'd already purchased property in Florida and enrolled in a yacht club, whatever that meant. The lawyer's email was coldly professional, but reading between the lines, it was clear. Jessica had chosen her new lifestyle over regular contact with her daughter. Again, I didn't know whether to feel relieved or heartbroken for Isabella. I consulted with both Sarah and Isabella's therapist about how to break the news. We decided honesty was best, but framed in a way that wouldn't make Isabella feel abandoned. That weekend, I took Isabella for ice cream and explained that Jessica and Michael had moved very far away. They wouldn't be able to have their regular visits anymore, but Jessica could still call and maybe visit sometimes when she was in town. Isabella was quiet for a moment, pushing her spoon through her hot fudge sundae. Is it because I didn't want to call her mommy? She finally asked. God, that broke my heart. No, sweetheart, absolutely not. Grown-ups make choices based on a lot of complicated things, but none of this is because of anything you did. She nodded, not entirely convinced. Over the next few weeks, she asked about Jessica occasionally, but with decreasing frequency. Jessica called exactly once, a stilted conversation where Isabella mostly answered with one word. She promised to send birthday and Christmas presents, which I suspected would actually happen. Jessica had always been good at grand gestures, just not the day-to-day work of parenting. 6 months later, Isabella rarely mentioned her mother anymore. She was thriving in kindergarten, had made several close friends, and had recently started taking dance classes that she absolutely loved. I'd been promoted at work, which meant a little more financial breathing room, and the ability to finally start a small college fund for her. On the 1-year anniversary of winning the initial custody case, a package arrived for Isabella. Inside was a fancy doll and a card signed, "Love, Jessica." Isabella looked at it briefly, then went back to the fort we'd been building in the living room. "Don't you want to play with your new doll?" I asked. She shrugged. "Maybe later. Can you hand me the red blanket for our roof?" That night, as I tucked her in, Isabella hugged me extra tight. "Daddy, are we always going to live together?" "Well, someday when you grow up, you might want your own place," I teased. "But until then, yes, we'll always be together." She smiled and closed her eyes, satisfied with that answer. As I turned off her light, I spotted her latest drawing taped to the wall, a picture of 2 stick figures holding hands under a bright sun. "Me and my dad" was written in wobbly kindergarten letters. I finally had my world's greatest dad moment, and it didn't come from a mug or a t-shirt. It came from knowing that despite everything, Isabella felt safe, loved, and completely at home. No court battle, fancy house, or Disney World vacation could ever compete with that.